I stood frozen at the bedroom door, one hand on my pregnant belly. The box of cupcakes from Magnolia Bakery, the ones I had queued over an hour to buy, slipped from my fingers and crashed to the floor, shattering like this marriage. Heavy, urgent breathing echoed from inside. That low, raspy male voice, so familiar I couldn't possibly be wrong, but my heart refused to believe it. With trembling hands, I pushed the door open. It swung wide, and two figures jumped apart. A young woman, cheeks flushed, scrambled to pull the blanket over the dotted marks on her skin. The air was thick with heat and sweat, suffocating me, choking my chest. Late summer still burned outside, and sweat had soaked through my shirt while waiting in line. But now, my whole body felt cold. The kind of cold that starts from the heart and spreads through every vein. My mind blanked like a power outage. Mechanically, I reached out and flipped on the light. The overhead lamp cast its glow directly onto the face of Lucas Kennedy, my husband. No panic. He leisurely slipped on the white dress shirt that had been draped over the bedpost. Every movement, slow, deliberate. My stomach twisted. I almost collapsed from the nausea. Shaking, I grabbed my phone and snapped a few photos, then silently turned and walked to the living room, letting my body fall onto the sofa. Lucas saw the girl out. Her heels clicked down the hallway, fading away. He emerged moments later, calm as ever, his eyes gliding past me. I didn't even know what I was waiting for, a confession, an apology, or just a sliver of courage to face me. I never thought I'd be the one standing in a scene like this, like a slap from fate. I looked down at my belly. The baby kicked gently, as if to remind me she was still here. My phone stayed tight in my grip, screen still lit with the photos. Undeniable proof. Lucas shuffled his slippers, deliberately kicked over the trash can, sending soda cans clattering across the wooden floor. He looked at me, face twisted in rage. Not the rage of guilt, but of someone who'd been exposed. Got enough pictures yet? Want me to call a few more girls for you to snap to your heart's content? His voice was cold, cutting, drenched in sarcasm, as if I were the one who'd done something wrong. I looked up, stared straight into eyes that now held nothing but contempt. From my dry throat, I forced out a few words. Lucas, is this really all you have to say to me? He froze, silent for a long moment, those pitch-black eyes flashing with something like surprise, like my words had struck a buried corner of him. His face stiffened, lips pressed tight, hands curling into fists. He didn't answer. Instead, he turned away, pulled a bottle of liquor from the fridge, and poured himself a full glass. I didn't know what to do. Didn't even know what I could do anymore. All I knew was that staying another second, another minute, felt like a needle stabbing straight into my heart. Instinct took over. I just wanted to leave, to get out of this place that used to be our home but had turned into hell. My steps trembled toward the door, but before I could reach it, he yanked my arm hard, dragging me back down onto the sofa. If the couch hadn't caught me, I would have hit the floor directly, pain spreading instantly from my lower abdomen. A dull ache bloomed in my belly. My face went ghostly pale, and my hands instinctively cradled my stomach. Cold sweat broke out, my breathing turned shallow and fast, and I clenched my teeth, trying to endure it. Only then did he show a hint of panic, eyes wide, stammering, I didn't mean to, but you're my wife, and your first reaction was to take photos. Don't you feel hurt at all, or do you just not care about me anymore? What even counts as hurt? Screaming, ripping her clothes, begging him on my knees to come back? He cheated on me in the very house I decorated with my own hands, on the bed where we once held each other through endless nights. And yet, taking a few photos as evidence somehow made me the one on trial. As if I'm the one who didn't love enough? It's absurd. The way he spoke, you'd think he was the one who got betrayed, who was suffering. I looked at him, and yes, there was something raw in his eyes, like a wounded animal trying to hide its pain. He dropped to one knee, guilt barely flickering across his face, and muttered softly, almost pleading, Sam, I was just drunk tonight. I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking straight. Please don't get upset. It's bad for the baby. So, this is who I married. A man who could perform so convincingly. I almost believed that furious monster from earlier was someone else entirely. The bitter irony. After 10 years of knowing him, 3 years married, my first instinct was still, don't provoke him. I was terrified that if I pushed too hard, he'd lose control and do something worse. And in this state, pregnant, a single shove could ruin everything. I dug my nails so deep into my palms, they broke skin and drew blood. Swallowing the rising fury like a crashing wave, half collapsed on the sofa, closing my eyes, helpless, as hot tears streamed silently down my cheeks. He seemed satisfied with that surrender, a faint, smug smile tugging at the corner of his lips. He reached out to pull me up, his coarse hand landing on my shoulder. I flinched, recoiling on the couch. His sweat, the reek of alcohol still clinging to him, made my stomach churn again. He didn't seem to notice. If anything, he looked more certain than ever, confident that I was pregnant, jobless, too scared to do anything. That familiar gleam of arrogance lit up his gaze. A moment later, his phone rang. Shrill and sharp, like a crow cawing, slicing through the suffocating silence. Even as he picked up, he tried to bargain with the caller, asking if they could reschedule, whispering out on the balcony. His back was to me, his tall figure blocking out the moonlight through the window. I watched his silhouette from the sofa, and the very thought of breathing the same air as him made my chest tighten, my throat clench, like something was stuck in it. But the more I showed my disgust, the harder it would be to break free. He was a suspicious man. My only way out now was to act, pretend, calm him down long enough to leave. So when he turned around, I covered my face with my hands, shoulders trembling, as if I was still trying to hold myself together through the pain. Lucas turned back, stunned, his steps frozen midair, a flicker of real confusion crossing his face. "Sam, you're still pregnant," he said, voice soft, almost pleading. "I'm sorry. It's all my fault. Please stop crying. Do it for the baby." He sounded like he actually cared, like he loved the baby, his tone gentle, laced with regret. I looked up, face soaked in tears, cheeks wet, eyes red and swollen. "Why?" I asked, my voice cracking, trembling with despair. "What did I do wrong?" He reached out to hold me, his arms coming around my shoulders. I stiffened, wanted to push him away, but didn't move. Let him hold me like I was just a lifeless wooden puppet, my body frozen, unresponsive. "You didn't do anything wrong. It's all on me." "I swear it won't happen again, Sam," he whispered in my ear, his breath hot against my neck. I gently pulled away, looking down at my belly, voice low and resigned, like a surrender. "Lucas, don't let there be a next time." He reached up to wipe my tears, his coarse fingers coming close to my cheek, but I turned away, avoiding his touch. My chest felt tight, my heartbeat chaotic and loud like it might shatter inside me. Thankfully, the shrill ring of his phone interrupted the moment, sharp and jarring like a warning from hell. He assumed I'd endure it all for the baby, for the years we'd been together. That assumption flickered in his eyes, a calm certainty, as he checked his phone in a rush. He glanced at me with a hint of guilt, then hurriedly transferred money to my account through an app. "Buy whatever you need," he said quickly. "I'll come back as soon as I finish this." I sat still on the sofa. His face showed something close to real remorse, but the ringing phone pierced through again like a whip, and in the end, he had no choice but to leave. The moment the door clicked shut, I wiped my tears with the back of my hand. They stopped falling. I stepped to the window, looked down at the garage, and watched his shiny black car roll away, the sound of the engine fading into the night. My heartbeat slowed, steadier now, but the anger still burned beneath the surface. I walked back into the bedroom, opened the secret drawer, hands trembling but swift, and pulled out the important papers, shoved them into my handbag. Then I packed a few basic things: clothes, toiletries, small essentials. As I passed the bedroom, my eyes landed on the wedding photo hanging on the wall. The frame's polished wood gleamed under the light. The girl in the picture was beaming, so bright, so blindly happy. Who would have thought this day would ever come? That smile now looked like mockery, tightening something inside my chest. I raised my hand, gave the frame a gentle push. It crashed to the floor, glass shattering in all directions, the sound echoing through the room. Pieces of the frame scattered like our fragile marriage, broken beyond repair. From bedroom to living room, the balcony still held all my plants and cacti, their green leaves glowing under the moonlight. Every pot, something I had tended with care, watered each morning. The soft sofa cushions, the sheer curtains swaying in the breeze, the glossy walnut dining table, even the cold tiles beneath my feet. Every detail had been chosen by me, lovingly, carefully. Even before today, I was still planning to buy a small balcony set, a round wooden table with 2 chairs, and floral tablecloths in the pale green leaf patterns Lucas liked. I imagined us sitting there on weekends, sipping tea, reading books, sunlight warming our faces, our little girl playing nearby. I truly believed that scene was our happiness, our future. But that day will never come now. All it took was one small change in schedule, me coming home a little early, and the truth was exposed. The happy life I thought I had was nothing but a thin layer of foam on the sea. One touch of light, and it vanished, leaving behind the bitter salt of betrayal and tears. Lucas had held me so many times, whispered into my ear, "This house only feels like home because of you. I'm grateful you gave me a real family, and now?" He had destroyed it all with his own hands, crushed everything with his filth, leaving behind a hollow house that reeked of lies. I hired 2 movers. They arrived quickly, packed up all my things, books, clothes, my favorite plants, each item wrapped carefully. The sound of packing tape tearing through the silence felt like the final goodbye. I pulled my suitcase out of the apartment. Outside, the late summer night wind brushed past. Cool, but not enough to ease the ache in my chest. I hailed a taxi, the heavy suitcase dragging my arm down. The driver, a middle-aged man with a deep voice, glanced at me through the rearview mirror. "Where to, miss?" I opened my mouth, but my throat tightened. The words stuck like a stone lodged inside. Where could I possibly go? It felt like there was no place left in the world for me. My closest friend didn't live in this city. She was thousands of miles away. The others, either mutual friends with Lucas, who would look at me with that mix of pity and curiosity, or casual acquaintances who might ask a few polite questions before forgetting about me entirely. But even with nowhere to go, I had to keep moving. The image of Lucas's smug face wouldn't stop replaying in my mind. I searched online for a hotel in the opposite direction from our house, booked a room, checked in, and unpacked. I collapsed onto the bed. The mattress was soft, but it couldn't cushion the emptiness inside me. My mind was fogged over, every emotion, pain, rage, helplessness, crashing together, layer upon layer. I didn't know how much time had passed before I felt the baby kick. Just a small nudge, but enough to jolt me. I hadn't eaten all day. My stomach was hollow, but I didn't feel hunger, only a cold void spreading through me. I unlocked my phone. The screen lit up. A notification blinked from Instagram. A friend request from an account with a Hello Kitty profile picture. I didn't need to guess who it was. I could still see her face clearly, the young woman clutching the blanket, eyes wide in panic, but glinting with a smug sort of triumph. Thinking of what was coming, I hit accept. Because aside from catching them in bed today, I still didn't know how deep it went. How much Lucas had hidden from me. How long he had lied. Her message came instantly. "Samantha, I'm so sorry. Neither of us ever wanted to hurt you." I didn't reply. I just sat there, watching her perform. The messages kept coming, long strings of excuses. How she couldn't help liking Lucas. How he had been so good to her, comforting her when her boss scolded her. helping her when she was on the verge of losing her job. "He's so pitiful," she wrote. "He lives every day in torment." Pitiful? Pitiful because he couldn't make his affair public while playing the role of a husband next to his pregnant wife. Tormented? Tormented by what? His guilty conscience? Or the thrill of betraying me? My hands trembled. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned off notifications, the screen going dark. I staggered to the bathroom, dropped to my knees in front of the toilet, and retched until my stomach twisted in pain, the bitter taste rising in my throat. I splashed cold water on my face, but it didn't wash away the lump stuck inside me. My stomach churned. I finally called room service for a light meal. The baby wouldn't stop moving tonight, kicking over and over again. Tears spilled down my cheeks, falling onto the hand resting on my belly. It must want to live so badly. This was the child I had longed for, the one I'd talk to every night, whispering promises of a happy family, of weekend mornings on the balcony, where we'd all have breakfast together. I forced myself to eat a spoonful of soup. It tasted as bland as my heart felt. The baby finally stopped kicking. She'd always been calm. When she first started to move, every time I placed my hand on my belly, she'd go still, as if listening to me. Just like tonight, after I ate a little and rubbed my belly, she quieted down again, like she knew her mother needed peace. But she didn't know that while I swallowed those spoonfuls of soup, all I could think about was when I would end it. I sat there from the moment darkness swallowed the city until the first faint light of dawn crept through the curtains. The pale glow slipped into the room like a quiet reminder that even the longest night must end. But the pain inside me remained untouched. That woman kept sending screenshots of their messages, each image flashing across Instagram like a blade slicing into a wound that refused to close. My fingers swiped the screen, tears blurring every word, but I kept reading, kept looking, like I wanted to torture myself. Since getting pregnant, Lucas had only taken me to one prenatal appointment, and now, through those messages, the truth stood clear before me. I pitied how hard he worked, never wanting to burden him, never wanting to seem weak. I honestly believed we were building a peaceful life together, but it had only ever been one-sided. Me giving everything, him taking and discarding it all. March 15th, my first checkup. After leaving the hospital, he rushed off, saying a client had called unexpectedly. I hadn't doubted him. The air that day was freezing, his coat soaked in rain, the wind slipping into his open collar. I remember taking off my hoodie and wrapping it around him, scolding him for not taking care of himself. He didn't listen, just ushered me into the car and sped away. I watched his taillights fade into the distance. It was the first time I'd ever seen him that frantic. He'd always been so calm before. I thought he was just worried about work, about me, about the baby. But now I know. He was rushing off to see another woman. After I got pregnant, I couldn't stand strong smells. Still, because I knew he loved mac and cheese, I forced myself to cook it for him, waiting again and again, reheating the dish every time it grew cold. In the end, all I got was a single message. "Babe, go to sleep early." Things got complicated here. "I'll be home tomorrow." And now, through her messages, I finally knew. He had rushed off that night to celebrate her birthday. No wonder he didn't reply until the next day. Thinking back, it's pathetic. I was nothing but a fool in his hands. She even sent a video from that night, a short clip, but sharp enough to pierce straight through my heart. In it, Lucas held a bouquet of flowers, surrounded by gifts glittering on the table, his eyes shining as he wished her happy birthday. Near the end, the camera tilted downward, catching the trash bin beside the table, and there, crumpled among the garbage, was a khaki hoodie. Just one glance, and I knew. It was the hoodie I had given him that day, something I'd wrapped around him with love. That hoodie, like my heart, had been thrown away like trash, without the slightest regret. Tears blurred the phone screen. No matter how much I wiped, they kept falling, dripping onto my trembling hands. But what use was crying? I stumbled into the bathroom, turned on the tap, splashed ice-cold water over my face. It ran down like heavy rain, bone-chilling, yet it couldn't cool the rage burning inside. Over and over, I forced myself to breathe, to calm down. Steam rose on the mirror, reflecting my face, one I barely recognized. When I was done, the messages were still coming. I flipped through them blankly, my fingers scrolling without thought. April 3rd, the second prenatal checkup. Afraid to disturb him at work, I went alone. In the waiting room, every woman had someone beside her. Except me. I sat there clutching my belly, terrified of hearing bad news. What woman doesn't wish, in that moment, for someone to hold her hand, to share her fears or joy? But I told myself Lucas was working hard for our family. I should understand. I should be strong. Reality slapped me hard. While I was at that clinic alone, he was at her apartment, laughing, holding her, living his version of happiness. How ironic. Back then, I even blamed myself. Thought his absence was from overwork, that the stress had worn him out. I remember noticing the dark circles under his eyes and feeling sorry for him. One rare night, he stayed home. I sat beside the bed, massaging his temples, my fingers tracing slow, gentle circles. I even teased him. Lucas, are you having pre-fatherhood anxiety or something? Our life isn't that hard, is it? He looked up at me, eyes wide with surprise, as if he couldn't believe what he heard. I leaned in, kissed his cheek, my lips brushing the warmth of his skin, and intertwined my fingers with his. My voice softened, full of guilt. We're husband and wife. I can't let you carry everything alone. Once the baby's a bit older, I can go back to work. Don't exhaust yourself too much, he said nothing. Just stared at me. And I thought that silence meant he was moved. I even reached out, pinched his cheek, grinning playfully. You know what? I've got some secret savings of my own. But even if I tell you, you're not allowed to touch it, okay? He looked up, his gaze so gentle that I thought, this was the man I'd fallen in love with, the Lucas I once knew. I lowered my head and whispered softly, but if things ever get tough, you can take a little. Back then, I was ready to give him everything, because I truly believed we were one. Now, I wonder, what was he thinking when he looked at me that night? Did he ever feel even a flicker of guilt? Did his conscience bite him, even for a second? Or was he silently proud of how good an actor he'd become? Skilled enough to deceive the woman who loved him this much? Skilled enough to make me hand over everything willingly? Or was his mind already somewhere else, planning what to say to me so he could leave sooner, so he could take that young woman out, buy her gifts, build her future? Maybe he was just consumed with lust for her youth, repeating the same cheap charm he'd once used on me 10 years ago. I read every message, every word cutting deeper into my chest. In the end, I began to despise myself. How could I have given up everything for someone like him? How could I still ache for him even after everything? That self-loathing turned into something darker. Hatred. A fire spreading through me, burning everything in its path. I hated his lies. I hated his betrayal. I hated being made a joke, a pawn in his game. I hated how he trampled on every bit of dignity, affection, and love I ever had for him. I stayed in that hotel room for 3 days straight, losing all sense of time, day or night. When the baby in my belly kicked, those faint, weak kicks barely stirred me anymore. I felt nothing but exhaustion, my whole body heavy as lead, sinking lifelessly into the bed. I tried to force myself to think, to plan for the future, but even the thought of stepping outside that room felt impossible. Then one morning, a streak of sunlight pierced through the curtains, landing across my face. Warm, blinding. I blinked, slowly sat up, every muscle aching, and with trembling hands, I yanked the curtains wide open. The sky outside was clear and blue. Down on the street, people hurried by, cars honking, laughter rising from below. The world kept spinning, indifferent to my pain. Life goes on. Some things you can hide from, others you simply can't. And I knew I had to face it. I forced myself up, got dressed, and was about to step out when my phone lit up with a video call from my best friend, Tracy Hall. Her familiar face filled the screen, bright smile and all. Reflexively, I declined the call. I couldn't let her see me like this, drained, hollow, ruined. But moments later, a voice message popped up on Instagram. Tracy's warm, worried voice came through the speaker. "Sam, what's going on? Why won't you answer my call?" That voice, it broke something inside me. My tears came all at once, unstoppable, streaming down my face. By afternoon, Tracy had already booked the earliest flight and came straight to me. She walked into my hotel room with a small suitcase, pulled me into her arms right at the door. The familiar scent of her perfume filled the air, and suddenly I realized, life isn't only made of pain. There are still small lights in this world. Friendship, care, the quiet warmth of someone who shows up. She went with me to the hospital for a full checkup. In the waiting room, I held her hand tight, palms damp with sweat. As we waited for the results, a chill ran through me, my body trembling. How could I have let my emotions drag me so far down that I almost forgot the most important thing? My health? My baby's life? The truth is, I had hesitated before. I had felt the baby move. After all, it was a child I'd carried for over 4 months, felt it grow day by day. Every tiny kick had been a reminder of hope. How could I possibly be cruel enough to let go of something so innocent, so alive? But because of this child, I had to be strong. I had to decide not to compromise, because I refused to repeat the tragedy that had shaped my own life. My life had been born out of compromise, one my mother regretted until her last breath. Years ago, my father cheated. My mother knew everything but forgave him again and again, because she was pregnant with me. And what came of it? Once a man crosses that line, he'll do it again and again. I grew up surrounded by shouting, shattering glass, and my mother's sobs. In the end, my existence only made it worse, made her more willing to surrender, to the point where even she began to resent me. The way she looked at me changed, from love to blame. "If it weren't for you," she'd whisper, "I would have left him long ago." She began to believe that her suffering was my fault, that her entire ruined life was because of the child who had tied her to a man unworthy of her. But what fault does a child have in being born? If I had a choice, would I ever want my existence to deepen her pain, to trap her in that hell? They finally divorced when I was in high school, after a night that still haunts me. That year, my father gambled everything away again. Drunk and seething, he unleashed all his rage on her. She was beaten nearly unconscious, left on the floor covered in bruises. When I came home from school that night, the smell of liquor hit me first. Then the scene, my mother lying motionless, my father standing above her, face red from drink, gripping the bottle in his hand. Something in me snapped. I couldn't take it anymore. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, my knuckles white from gripping the handle, and charged at him. I wasn't afraid to die. In that moment, I actually thought, if one of us dies, my mother will finally be free. If he kills me, he'll go to prison and she'll be free. If I kill him, I'll go to prison and she'll be free. But reality is never that simple. The strength between a man and a teenage girl is too far apart. I managed to slash his arm first. He stared at me, stunned, eyes wide. "You little bitch! How dare you!" he roared, and the next second, he kicked me hard. I fell backward, my spine crashing against the floor, my head slamming into the cabinet. Blood poured down my face, warm and metallic, blinding my eyes, filling my mouth with the taste of iron. My vision blurred, but I wasn't afraid, just furious. That night, I knew one of us had to end it, that this cycle of hell couldn't go on. And in that moment, it wasn't fear that consumed me. It was rage. Pure, burning rage. It coursed through me like adrenaline, forcing me back onto my feet, trembling but unyielding. I hated him. His cowardice, his selfishness, his violence, his utter lack of humanity. I hated every time his fists came down on my mother, on me. But fate has always been the best screenwriter. It never runs out of cruel surprises. It handed me a third choice that night, an unexpected escape that changed everything forever. Maybe it was my mother's desperate screams, or maybe the noise from my father and me struggling had grown too loud. But somehow it woke Lucas, who lived in the room next door. He climbed in through the window and stood between us. He was 18 then, tall, broad-shouldered, his body solid from years of sports training. It took him almost no effort to subdue my father. After that night, my parents finally divorced. I thought I would feel happy, relieved, like a weight had been lifted. But in the years that followed, my mother often turned her anger on me. Her eyes were sharp and cold whenever she looked at me. "He's still your father," she would say. "How could you treat him like that? You're the reason this family fell apart. Life is absurd, a tragic play that keeps repeating itself. There was a time when I loved her so deeply, so fiercely, that I threw myself between her and every beating, trying to shield her with my body. Even when I couldn't protect her, every time his fists landed on me, I thought, if I take the pain, maybe she won't have to." That's how much I loved her. So much that I carried the guilt of existing, believing that my very presence was the sin that dragged her deeper into hell. And yet, in the end, she turned on me, calling me heartless for hurting my father, calling me a broken daughter. But who was the woman who once cried before me, who once held me and said, "If it weren't for you, I would have left him long ago"? People change. Love can turn into hatred overnight. My mother said she once loved me dearly, but all I remember is her tear-streaked face, her eyes filled with exhaustion and resentment, glaring at me whenever he was gone. "If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be like this." Those words cut deep into my young heart like a knife. Lucas once said he loved me too, whispered it in my ear as he held me close. "You're everything to me." But it was him who betrayed me, left me broken and bleeding, body and soul. I'd rather admit that I don't love the child inside me. I don't want this baby to grow up inside the same cycle of bitterness. I don't want my weakness to become regret someday. Don't want her to feel the coldness of a mother who can't love her fully, to live a lifetime of guilt and pain, repeating my own tragedy. I stared at the white ceiling, alone with the ache and the emptiness, my hand resting on my belly, trembling fingers tracing gentle circles one last time. Hatred rose inside me, fierce, burning, unstoppable. I hated myself for being a cruel mother, but I hated him more, the man who drove me here, Lucas. Why did I have to bear all this pain alone? Only when everyone suffers, when he suffers too, will it truly be over. When Lucas came rushing into the clinic, the sound of his footsteps echoed down the hospital hallway in panic, his face pale as ash. I was lying there on the hospital bed, numb, dazed, my body frozen as the medication began to take effect. My eyes blank, fixed on the ceiling, my hand instinctively resting on my abdomen, which had started to cramp slightly. He burst into the room, red-eyed, his gaze darting around before landing on me. His voice shook, breaking like he was on the verge of tears. "Sam, you're lying to me, right?" He stared at my stomach, terrified, his hand reaching out but stopping short, trembling, his face contorted, lips pressed tight, as if holding back a rising wave of hysteria. The cramping grew sharper, more violent. I clenched my teeth as pain shot through me, beads of sweat forming on my forehead. He looked up at me cautiously, his voice desperate, almost pleading. "Sam, I was wrong, okay? But please, don't joke about the baby like this ever again, all right?" He still stupidly believed this was all just some cruel prank. I wished it was too, that the past days had just been a nightmare, some twisted joke I'd eventually wake from. But reality was too brutal, too visceral to be erased. I looked at him, my voice cold and dry, slicing through the thick air. "There is no next time." The words struck like a blade. He froze, his face going rigid. "Sam! Sam!" he stammered, voice splintering. His hand, which had been hovering above my belly, recoiled like it had been burned, his fingers curling, eyes wide with disbelief and devastation. "Samantha, you really," he whispered, voice cracking. And then, suddenly, his expression twisted with fury, his face flushing red, eyes bloodshot like a wild animal losing control. He lunged forward and gripped my throat with both hands, squeezing hard. My breath caught in my chest. "What kind of woman are you? What the hell is your heart made of? Why? How could you be this cruel? That's your child too!" he screamed, each word soaked in wounded rage. But immediately, Tracy and a nurse rushed in, pulling him off me. He thrashed and kicked, but they managed to restrain him, forcing him to the floor where he collapsed, gasping for air, tears still streaming down his face. I watched him, watching his pain, his madness, and for a split second, I almost laughed. "Lucas, you're asking me why," I said, my voice sharp, piercing. "That's the same question I've been asking you. Why? What did I do to deserve this from you? Now you remember you're a father. Now you remember this is your child too? So where was that memory when you were sneaking around, sleeping with someone else, trampling everything I gave, destroying my trust? Why didn't you hold on to even a shred of decency? For me, for your child." My words struck him like needles. He dropped his head, his shoulders trembling, unable to respond, just sitting there, drowning in his silence. How ridiculous. So now he cares about the baby? Then why was he so merciless, with me, with both of us, until now? Just then the doctor came in. Lucas latched onto him like a lifeline, grabbing his arm desperately, his voice frantic and hoarse. "Doctor, please! She can't do this to our baby. That's my child too. Do something. Whatever it costs, I'll pay anything." The female doctor, who had administered the medication earlier, meticulous and composed, now looked visibly irritated. Her eyes were stern as she yanked her arm away and said coldly, "Calm down. This is the patient's decision. This is not about money. I spent an entire week in that hotel bed, never once leaving the small room. Days and nights blurred together behind tightly drawn curtains. My body ached everywhere, but it was my heart that felt truly numb, hollow, drained of all emotion. If it hadn't been for Tracy staying by my side, I honestly don't know what I would have done. Maybe I would have just stayed there, letting the darkness swallow me whole. But Lucas's mistress, Jonna Dawson, found me anyway, like a ghost that refused to let go. For days, I had ignored her Instagram messages, so this time she called directly. I picked up. Her voice came through sharp and mocking. "Samantha, what the hell is wrong with you? Babe's had a high fever all week. What did you do to him?" I gripped the phone tightly, said nothing, just listened to her heavy breathing on the other end, as if she were trying to restrain her rage. Her voice rose higher, shriller. "Say something! What did you do? Do you even know what he looks like right now?" My tone stayed flat, cold as ice. "So, is he dead?" Silence. Then she screamed, furious. "You'd be happy if he died, wouldn't you? You're insane! You're a monster! Just because he doesn't love you doesn't mean he deserves to die." I hung up immediately and saved the call recording. I never wanted to attack other women or blame them. I've always known, when a man cheats, the greatest fault lies with him. He's the one who betrays. But that doesn't mean I'll forgive a woman who dares to cross the line, to trample, to provoke me with that smug tone of hers. In my hands, I had every message and piece of evidence Jana herself had sent, and the home security footage I'd saved before leaving. Alongside that, I had quietly gathered access to all of Lucas's bank accounts and financial apps. As expected, he'd generously bought Gianna an entire apartment. I began organizing everything, each file neatly labeled, every document stacked across the table. I was preparing for the final battle. When I finally recovered a bit, my body still sore but my mind steadier, I arranged to meet him at a cafe with my lawyer. He sat across from me, eyes full of contempt, red veins spidering through the whites, fingers gripping his coffee cup so tightly his knuckles turned white. His voice came out through clenched teeth. Samantha, what are you still pretending for? Isn't this all just about money? People like you only ever care about yourself. You once threatened your own father with a knife. What wouldn't you do? To you, it's always everyone else's fault. You're never wrong. How could you do this to our child? The more he spoke, the louder he got, his tone rising with anger, his face flushed, slamming his fist on the table until the coffee rippled over the edge. I sat there in silence, watching him calmly, holding a cup of hot tea between my hands, warmth seeping into my fingers, but leaving my heart untouched. When he finally ran out of breath, panting as if he'd just finished a marathon, I smiled faintly and said, "What a wonderful father. What a perfect husband. Any woman would be lucky to have you. Unfortunately, I wasn't that lucky. So why don't you go make another woman happy instead?" His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His face drained of color, hands trembling. You! You! Divorce was never easy. Beyond the mandatory mediation sessions, the endless hearings, the back and forth between lawyers, my condition was clear. I wanted 2/3 of all marital assets. My voice stayed calm as I read the clause aloud in front of him. The house, the car, the joint accounts, everything will be divided by this ratio. At first he shrugged, pretending not to care, smirking, "Do whatever you want." But once his interests were touched, he flipped instantly, calling me greedy, selfish, his voice booming across the conference room. "All you care about is money. You're a pathetic, money-hungry woman." That was fine. If he didn't agree, I had time. I had patience. I sat there and let him scream. Then I released a few of the videos online. Footage of him and Gianna laughing, holding each other, the sound of their voices echoing through the clip. I posted them on local media pages with the caption, "A perfect husband?" and watched them spread like wildfire. Gianna had taken a leave from university for a year and hadn't graduated yet, so I sent everything to her school's confession page too. That night, just as I was about to sleep, Lucas called. On the phone, he was screaming, voice cracking with fury and disbelief. "Samantha! Do you know Gianna tried to kill herself?" I paused for a few seconds, then asked coldly, "So she's dead?" He shouted, his voice breaking. "You wanted her to die, didn't you? She's only in her 20s. "Yes," I said evenly. "So young, it's tragic. Fell for the wrong man. A liar. A cheater. Irresponsible to the core. Ended up like that. Well, I suppose she made the same mistake I did. Loving the wrong person." I was still mumbling as if telling someone else's story when he hung up. I pulled the blanket over my head and went back to sleep. If he was hurting, good. The next morning, when I opened the door, sunlight flooded the hallway. My mother was standing there, her face lined with worry. I'd rented this apartment myself, so Lucas must have given her the address. His voice from last night still echoed in my head. I didn't know what to say. Most of the time, I was just tired. Too tired for words. I stood there, gripping the door handle, looking at her. In her hands, she carried several bags. Without a word, she walked past me into the kitchen, her steps slow but steady. She cooked my favorite dishes. I couldn't look at her. I kept my head down, spooning soup into my mouth. Its warmth spread through me, but my throat felt tight. She came up behind me, thin arms wrapping around me in a trembling hug, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sam, something this big. How could you not tell me? Why didn't you talk to me?" I closed my eyes, exhaled slowly. "If I had," I said softly, "what would you have told me to do?" She froze, her body stiffening. I didn't meet her eyes, just kept speaking, quiet but firm. "Didn't you forgive that man? The one who ruined you? I don't want to." "Don't want what?" she interrupted, her voice rising, shaking with fear. "I don't want to wake up one day filled with regret. I don't want to take my anger out on my child. I don't want them to grow up asking themselves why they exist, or hating themselves for it." When I finished, I stood up, dragging my tired body back to my room. I gathered myself, sat at my desk, and finished a few final documents with my lawyer. When I came out again, there was still hot food on the stove, the smell filling the apartment. In that moment, I realized she truly loved me. It wasn't that she didn't care. It was that her marriage had drained her so deeply she'd forgotten how to be a mother, forgotten what normal love between husband and wife, or mother and child, was supposed to look like. Years of bitterness and forgiveness had eroded her, but she still loved me. And that was enough. I took her hand, squeezed her wrinkled fingers, looked straight into her eyes, and said, steady and clear, "My life is mine to decide. No one can break me. I would do it again and again, just like that night years ago when I saved her, and myself, pulling us both out of the pit of our lives, walking forward with my head held high." Gianna had been discharged from the hospital for barely 2 days when I arranged a meeting with both her and Lucas at a quiet cafe. The moment she saw me calmly sipping hot tea, her emotions exploded like she wanted to rip me apart. Her face flushed red, a mixture of pitifulness and hostility, just like I'd looked the day I caught her in my bedroom, on my bed, with my husband. She sat down with a sob, covering her face with trembling hands, her shoulders shaking, asking through tears what it would take for me to finally leave her alone. I smiled slightly, set my teacup on the table, and said, "I'm extremely unhappy. And when I'm unhappy, I tend to do certain things." My words cut through the air like a sudden chill, and she froze, eyes wide in panic. "Samantha!" Lucas barked, furious, his voice sharp and loud. "Shut up! You're crazy!" I casually picked up the nearby teacup and threw it straight at him. The tea splashed across his face, dripping down his shirt. "Your turn hasn't come yet, so what's the rush?" Gianna gasped beside him, covering her mouth in shock, then rushed to wipe his face with a napkin, clearly more concerned about him than herself. I sat back, watching Lucas take it all in. Gianna sobbing beside him wiping tea off with his sleeve, his eyes darting between two women, a cold, bitter ex-wife with a deadpan smile, and a young, weeping mistress clinging to him. Maybe he was calculating his options again, but in the end, he chose her. He agreed to the divorce, sat down with a weary sigh, and muttered, "Fine. I'll accept your terms." I knew they'd been fighting nonstop recently. But she was young, easily swayed by flowers, by soft words, by candlelit dinners. I didn't care. To me, Lucas was now nothing more than a stranger, a faded silhouette in my rearview mirror. I no longer cared what he would do next, whether he laughed, cried, found joy, or drowned in misery. It was no longer my concern. Gianna's scandal had already spread like wildfire. Online gossip, university confession posts flooded with comments. She wouldn't graduate, and I heard people had started digging into Lucas too. He thought money could fix everything, thought I made noise just for financial gain. He was wrong. I didn't need his money. What I needed was for him to understand. Betraying me would cost him more than any dollar amount. It would cost him his dignity, his peace, and everything he thought he could still hold on to. When I heard Gianna was pregnant, I wasn't surprised. I imagined Lucas once again playing the role of the doting father. He probably thought life would go on, that he could start fresh with his new lover, leaving me with wounds that would never fully heal. He probably believed I had nothing to complain about, since I walked away with the majority of our marital assets, money, property, everything he once flaunted. But he never understood. I didn't need wealth to feel whole. Money can't patch up a shattered heart. It can't erase betrayal. What I needed was justice. I needed him to pay the price with the one thing he valued most. That's why I quietly sold off my shares in the company to Connor Zane, Lucas's sworn enemy. I knew it would drive him mad. And it did. His company crumbled, stocks plummeted, employees quit in droves. I didn't spare him. I didn't feel sorry. He stomped all over my heart. Now it was his turn. He once asked me why. His voice still echoes from that final meeting. "Why would you do this?" I wanted him to ask himself why he had done this. Why he had dared to betray me, to throw me into hell with his lies. And only when he truly feels that kind of pain, maybe then I'll feel like it's enough. Maybe then I'll finally be able to close this book of nightmares. Connor Zane, the mortal enemy to whom I sold my shares, now held more power than Lucas and pressed him at every turn. Lucas tried to hold on for a while, but in the end, he couldn't survive the pressure. He was forced to liquidate his shares, take the cash, and walk away. Right then, I filed a lawsuit to reclaim the assets he had spent on his mistress while we were still legally married. He had no choice but to wire me another large sum of money. The months after the divorce passed slowly, the pain settling like sediment to the bottom of a still lake, leaving only silence on the surface. I moved into a small apartment where morning light seeped through sheer curtains, warming the wooden floor, and the sound of gentle waves whispered like a lullaby, washing away the sleepless nights. I traveled the world, walked barefoot on the white sands of the Maldives, the salty breeze tossing my hair as I held my camera and captured blazing sunrises. I wandered cobbled streets and historic towns, finally living the free life I had long dreamed of. No more ties, no more pain. My life was no longer bound to a single path, but stretched into infinite roads ahead, each step a fresh beginning, peaceful, sovereign, mine. My mother visited more often now, walking into my home with bags of food she had cooked herself, and we sat together at a small dining table. Her eyes no longer carried bitterness. The lines around them whispered stories of forgiveness and healing. Tracy video called every week, beaming from the screen. "Sam, you look amazing!" And I smiled back. A real smile from the heart, no longer fake. I started a new job at a women's support organization, helping those who had been betrayed like me. I spent my days in the office listening to stories that echoed mine, and every evening I walked along the beach at sunset, my steps light on the path, while the river breeze tossed my hair, carrying the scent of salt and freedom. I watched the sun disappear behind the horizon, its golden orange glow spilling across the water, and I felt the truth of a new beginning, one without betrayal. Just peace. Just me, stronger than I've ever been. The scars are still there, but they remind me of the road I've traveled, of the strength it took to stand again and keep walking, without regret. If this story has brought a little healing to your heart, please like and comment with the moment that made you feel most at peace. Thank you for joining Sam's journey. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to hear more stories of strength and renewal.